Thanks everybody for coming. We really appreciate you taking a time out of one of your summer evenings. For those of us in the program, summer classes ended last week and the fall semester doesn't start until next week on September 2nd. So it's a great time to talk about some really critical, important issues. This is the third in a series, and so I wanted to introduce tonight's participants and then cover the basic topics. We've asked Bill Leach, who is a friend and a colleague of mine. We've taught together now 8 years, Bill, give or take.
Yep.
Where I went to college is where he has his doctorate, so I'll have him introduce himself in just a minute. Talk about social justice and diversity inclusion, what's happening at USC and the Price School. We have 3 expert alumni joining us tonight that we're very excited about hearing their thoughts about what they're currently doing in their professional world and how they're contributing to making all of us live in a better world. And then we'll take some questions at the end of the presentation. So if you'll use your chat box for questions at any point in time, but when we're finished with the presentations, then we'll moderate a Q&A session. So without further ado, I am the program coordinator. I've been teaching at USC since 1996. I specialize in both the residencies, the start of our program and the finish graduation residency, as well as I teach public policy and the Capstone program. I am joined in teaching Capstone by Bill Leach, and since he's the expert and our featured professor tonight, I will let him introduce himself. So Bill, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you.
And sorry, Bill, before I do that, Ben Fu is here tonight with the city of Cupertino. Dominique Samario just started a new job with the city of Menifee in Southern California. And Elizabeth Jordan Devaney is in San Francisco with a nonprofit. And she's a glutton for punishment and has already gone back to start her doctorate degree. So she's also at Johns Hopkins as another graduate student. So I'm sorry, Bill.
No, thank you, Dora. So I'm Bill Leach, and I've been teaching here in the Price School for about 8 years now. And Dora mentioned my doctorate is actually in environmental policy from University of California, Davis. And in the MPA program, I teach a course on collaborative governance. I teach a course on program evaluation. And then I teach a third course, which I think is the reason why I was asked to present this evening, which is a course on urban planning and social policy. And I'll say just a few words about that course in a second. So Emily, could you, next slide here. So here's just a couple of questions that I asked the panelists, the alumni, to think about in terms of kind of like framing our discussion tonight. So first, how are social justice and sort of this related concept of diversity and inclusion, how is that relevant to our current work? What are you doing that intersects with these ideas? And also, because we're in such a unique and momentous moments, how have the events of 2020, the pandemic, and especially the Black Lives Matter movement and all the perturbations of that, how is that affecting or maybe changing the way that you address these issues in your own work? So on the next slide, I was just going to speak very kind of briefly to how I'll try to answer those questions for myself. How am I, how are these current events and these ideas changing the way my approach to my job here in the Price School? And one place where this comes up directly is in this course that I teach, urban planning and social policy. I guess just to kind of back up a second, social justice, it's a term that means a lot of different things to different people. And if you interact with a diverse, politically diverse group of people at work or in your community, I think you'll find that. But one thing that social justice kind of means to me, one sort of core idea that I think we try to have show up in all of our courses in the MPA program, is just the idea that because we're doing public administration and nonprofit management, we're affecting people's lives. And because we're dealing with politics and policy and program implementation, not everybody is going to be affected by a policy or a program the same way. Often there are going to be winners and losers. Definitely, hopefully the work that we're doing is improving lives, but there might be people that are actually negatively impacted by a specific law or program or policy. And so at the very minimum, we want to make sure that we're conscious of how is the work that we're doing, how is it affecting people in different demographic groups? Is it having different impacts on people according to ethnicity or race or gender? So yeah, I think we try to hit that idea in each of the courses in the program. But with this one course that I teach, Urban Planning and Social Policy, it's sort of the top line. It's the thing that we're talking about at the very beginning. So on the screen here, you see some bullet points. Each of these different topics, yeah, I can stay there a minute. Each of these different topics are essentially 1 week of the course. And so we begin with a unit on race, gender, and religion in social policy. I think if you're interested in this topic, you probably know that social outcomes tend to vary widely in the United States. We have a lot of inequality, a lot of inequity in terms of health and economic outcomes, housing, you name it. And so the first week of the course, we're just trying to document the inequities that exist, and also trying to think about the ways in which our own lived experience might affect our sort of unconscious, subconscious orientation to social policy. And yeah, so we carry that theme throughout all 15 weeks of the course, and yeah, so this is one place in the MPA program where we are dealing with social justice and diversity and inclusion issues throughout the semester. For the next slide, if I can just kind of pan back a little bit and think about how are these topics reflected in the Price School in general. On the next slide, Emily, please. Yeah, so this is just a screenshot from the website at the Price School that is devoted to diversity, inclusion, and social justice. So just kind of very briefly, I wanted to say that, point out that the Price School is, I think one of the first schools on campus that really made a concerted effort to write a detailed diversity and inclusion plan. We started this about 8 years ago. So it addresses all sorts of issues, trying to make the faculty more diverse and establishing some benchmarks and sort of plans for achieving different aspects of diversity and inclusion within the Price School. And we also were one of the first schools that elevated a position in the dean's cabinet, so to speak, an associate dean whose job is focused on diversity and inclusion issues at the Price School. So Dr. Lavana Lewis has been playing that role here at Price for the last several years now. Anyway, if you're interested, you can visit pricediversity.usc.edu and kind of learn about all the different things that are happening here in the Price School. Lots of different events, listening sessions, workshops, and so on. And then if I can, pan out a little bit farther still and just kind of highlight some of the things that are happening university-wide. About 2 weeks ago, I think it was, President Carol Folt sent an email out to the university community highlighting some of the things that the university has been doing in response to current events. And I think the university has been pretty proactive and pretty aggressive about responding to BLM and the pandemic, and really trying to make some meaningful changes. So again, these are 8 things that the university is doing. I actually shared this list with my class, the Urban Planning and Social Policy class, right after the email came out, and I wanted to get their sense of is this going to be meaningful change? And I would say that by and large, students were a little bit skeptical. They were concerned that maybe this is just window dressing, maybe it's just symbolism, and that it might not actually lead to meaningful change at the university. And my response was that sort of a hopeful response, which is that I have confidence that this actually is going to be more than just symbolism, mainly because the people that have been assigned to lead these 8 different initiatives are really high quality people who I trust. And just kind of briefly, I can say a few words about a couple of them. So like number 2 refers to a community advisory board for the Department of Public Safety. This is essentially the police force that USC employs on campus and in the local surrounding community. So a number of, across the country, it's become more and more common for police forces or for local governments to establish civilian-based oversight boards to kind of deal with complaints against police officers and so on, and develop policy and programs around use of force and so on. And so this is essentially what the university is attempting to do here. And yeah, just for example, the person who's leading up this effort for USC is another Price School faculty member, Errol Southers, who he happens to be, he's an African-American who, as a young man, decided to join the police force. He wanted to be a police officer, largely because, as he tells the story, you know, he was experiencing personally a lot of the problems that you know we're grappling with today, and he felt like he could make positive changes, you know, from the inside, working within a police department. So he went on to become a police officer in Santa Monica, and eventually worked for 6 different police organizations or law enforcement organizations, including the FBI. And then he went on to get a doctorate in public administration, and became an expert in terrorism and right-wing extremism, and then he joined the Price School as a faculty member. Anyway, so he has an excellent background, sympathetic to you know, public safety issues, but also very sympathetic to the sort of social justice and diversity and inclusion sorts of issues as they relate to public safety. So anyway, I have confidence that, you know, there might actually be some really good positive change coming out of that. And then just briefly, the university is doing things like creating a presidential task force so that the president's office can be, you know, appraised on these issues regularly. There's a new chief inclusion and diversity officer, essentially a vice president of the university, is going to be created. This person is being, there's a search for this person who's going to occupy this office currently. The university is trying to create like physical space on campus for various minority groups based on ethnicity. I think there's going to be one for LGBTQ plus students. There's going to be one for I think Middle Eastern students. Anyway, we had a conversation about this idea in my urban planning class just a couple of weeks ago. I was a little concerned that maybe it was going to, you know, create, you know, essentially some segregation on campus. But my students thought that it was probably going to be a good thing. They felt like, you know, many of them had experienced a similar sort of space for programming for particular affinity groups as an undergraduate, wherever they did their undergraduate degree, and they felt it was a positive aspect of campus. So that's something else that's happening here at USC. All the faculty are going to be required to do some sort of unconscious bias training. We actually do some of this in my course on urban planning and social policy, and most students think it's a very good exercise. So that's going to be rolled out for all faculty on campus. And then we're doing things like renaming buildings and so on that have been, you know, any organization as old as USC is going to have some leaders who are affiliated with, you know, ideas from the past that you know, have fallen well out of favor, things like eugenics and so on. And so there was one building on campus that was named after a president, but also you know, professor who dabbled in eugenics. And so, you know, this year in 2020, the building has been, the name has been removed from the building, and there's this process underway to rename the building. And then finally, community collaboration. There's really, well, this is a process that's started actually under a former Price dean by the name of Jane Pisano, who actually went on to create something called the Good Neighbors Program, where USC does a lot of good work in the neighboring community, which is, you know, it's largely African-American and Latino community and low-income community. And so you know, over the last couple of decades, the university has been really trying to build partnerships and with the community surrounding the university campus itself. And so this is not necessarily a new initiative, but it's sort of a redoubling of efforts around this process. So anyway, that's just kind of a quick overview of some things that are happening within the MPA program, within the Price School, and more broadly at USC. So thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that. I want to introduce Ben Fu to talk about his background and the work that he does. Ben was a student leader, whether he wanted to or not. He shepherded many cohorts of students through the program during his time. And he worked on a capstone project consulting for a client who was based in Wilmington, Delaware. And so he and his capstone team, Dr. Leach talked extensively about what's happening in the Los Angeles area. Ben had the experience of actually going coast to coast and traveling with his capstone team and spending days in Wilmington with the client and the projects that they were working on. But I've always been fascinated by his success and his work in this area. And he's a new father with a 5-month-old. So congratulations, Ben. We appreciate your time with us here tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. D. Am I coming through okay? Great. I would just say Dr. D and Dr. Leach are two of my favorite faculty's members during my time here. So when the opportunity came, I had to participate. So, and we have a great panel. Elizabeth and Dominique are just fantastic and much better leaders than I was ever in this area and overall. So thank you for the opportunity. A little bit about myself. Grew up in Orange County, Southern California. Went to school at Berkeley up here in Northern California. Degrees in architecture and city and regional planning. So I did a few years in architecture, did some residential and commercial design, and then transitioned that into a city planning career, urban design career. Started with San Francisco, and then fast forward that 20 plus years now. Now I'm the director of community development with the city of Cupertino. Cupertino, or better known as the home of Apple. It's the biggest employer in town and in the Silicon Valley. So, our community development department, for those of you who may or may not be aware, we comprise of 4 major divisions. We have planning that basically deals with the design of the structures as well as land use zoning requirements. We have building division that basically it takes whatever planning approves and make sure it can be built and it can be built safely. And we have a housing division that deals with affordable housing and also administers our city's affordable housing program. We also have code enforcement, which is exactly what it sounds like. It enforces code, building codes, safety codes, land use, muni codes. And that's usually what a community development department would look like countrywide. I would say probably, I don't have the data for this, probably 75% of the cities will have something like this. And bigger cities like San Francisco will have a separate planning department and a separate building departments. And you'll find housing and code enforcement kind of embedded into different functionalities, whether it's a city attorney's office or city manager's office or building or planning. And so that's a little bit about our department. As you can see, the roles are my job for our department is listed on the slide. But what really has been impacted is during the current pandemic and also all the social injustice that we've been facing. That kind of changes all of our roles quite a bit. As an example, we as part of we initiated started this homeless task force to deal with homelessness in our city. For those of you who may be familiar with Cupertino, may not think we have a homeless issue. We're mostly a sort of an international city, so that's how I will call it. Fairly affluent in terms of education and employment, but we do have a homeless issue as well. And so we have a task force that comprised of my departments, public works departments, as well as our emergency services division. So with that, we coordinate with the county, looking for funding, housing options, and services to provide for those who are homeless, and make sure that wherever they're staying at the moment is sanitary, is safe, and until we can find a better home for them, that is where they feel most comfortable staying in. Also, outreach has changed a lot about how we conduct outreach, making sure that we are more broadly in our outreach efforts, in person, mail notices, citywide postcards, email blast, social website blasts, those kind of efforts, holding a variety of workshops and virtual study sessions such as educating the public in our community about affordable housing, how to qualify for one of the units, what the requirements are, how to fill an application. Again, our population is fairly international, so we'll find that most of them, English is not their first language. So trying to provide as many avenues as possible for them to seek out their first home. And also too is our transparency and our accountability. We're sort of revamped our city website, posting a variety of project information on our website so that the website becomes more of a conduit to the residents as well as business owners and developers. And that way we could be more accountable as well. We have a sort of a more of a special complaint hotline, if you will, where anybody can reach out and contact us. So we're reachable and we can have conversations about whatever the concerns are for the community. And then finally is sort of the housing and commercial accessibility to all. We have been conducting these outdoor activities for our state. A variety of activities have been opened up, occupying the public realm. We want to make sure that we can do that in a safe manner, not just for the business owners, but also for the public as well. So a couple of different initiatives to come up with an outdoor activities sort of permitting process to fast track some of these uses, as well as providing the public the ability to access these, right? You want to get a haircut, you want to get your nails done, you want to go to the gym. We have outdoor gyms to make sure that cities no longer act as a bureaucracy or red tape, which is something we work really hard on, even before the current situation, but even more so now, is for us to kind of break down the walls, break down the bureaucracy, make sure we're here and we can be contacted and we're available to the public. And those are sort of a few overall what we have experienced as a city in these times. So with that, I would end with that, and happy to answer questions at the end. And thank you all for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate your comments. I think the conversation about changing rules and regulations and fast tracking decision making in a pandemic situation is really important and something we might explore in just a little bit. I'd like to introduce Dominique Samario. She has been instrumental in student governance at Price during her time. Is always an enthusiastic participant in whatever we ask of her, and we ask a lot. So I know that you have just changed jobs and you're on their second week in a new position with a new city, Dominique. So thanks for taking time out. I noticed that there's no artwork on your office wall behind you, but I'm looking for that graduation diploma.
Yes, I will chime in by saying that I have my MPA and my certificate in local government, which I got through my MPA program, already framed and ready to hang in my new office. So I'm really excited about that. But I'm even more excited to be a part of this panel. This is a topic that is really important to me and something I'm very passionate about, and something really directly related to my time at Price and the online MPA program. I'll start off by just giving a little bit of my background, but then tying it into, this topic and just how much the program has had on my day-to-day work. So I got into this field and wanting an MPA. I originally started out in communication. Interestingly enough, I did get my undergrad from USC as well, but that's not why I wanted to go back to get my MPA from the Price School. It was really about the fact that I was just looking for the very best program, and I really did a lot of research and spent a lot of time and decided to go with the online MPA because I was then at the time working in local government, and I wanted to continue working full time. And I was able to do so and have just made the best contacts and had the best experience that I'm able to bring into my workplace every single day. So I, as Dr. Dora mentioned, just moved to start as the public information officer for a city in Southern California. And I can say with near certainty that my MPA and the experience that I had were directly related to me getting this position. And, as it relates to this topic, I think for me that I've always been the type of person in whichever role I played. I worked in news media out of college and then worked in media within local government. And then my roles within local government sort of grew from there. And I always, and maybe that's kind of my news and communication background, but I always had a goal of being very fair and very equitable, as you might say. But I think the reason that the MPA and particularly the course that Dr. Leach was talking about had such a great impact on me was that, you don't know what you don't know. And, while I thought I was doing the very best and I thought that, the work that I'm doing is having a positive impact on my community, and I knew that I was a very equitable individual, I think that the courses at Price really taught me how there are so many public policy decisions that we are all making. Ben talked about it in his role, and I'm going to speak to it in my role in public information and communication, that you don't even know who you're harming by not doing things in an equitable manner. And so for me, taking that course, looking at things like my, personal biases, unconscious biases were just critical in how I started to approach my job. And I really think from the perspective of looking forward in my career, it sort of brings you from diving into a certain work to really stepping up to that, as they say, 30,000 foot level, where you go, okay, I know I'm working hard, but am I working hard and making the right kind of impacts that I want to be making? And I don't want to look back in 5 years and realize that a program that I oversaw, to the best of my ability at the time, was actually having some negative impacts on the communities around me. So how I've really been able to implement the work and, the education that I got from the MPA program is to really look at everything we're doing as a city. Because from my perspective, cities really impact the day-to-day life of people. I mean, we have direct impacts on how people live. And, you need to look at the programs that I'm putting out there. I can share information, prolifically and extensively, but am I sharing it with all of my constituents equally? Have I considered who has access to internet, who's utilizing social media? What are the reasons that they might not have access to those things? How do we bridge that gap? How are, the languages that I'm putting information out in? Somebody can be doing great work, but if people in your community don't know about it, don't know about the programs that are available to them, how is that impacting their ability to utilize your services? I oversaw, prior to joining this position, I oversaw a lot of our special projects directly related to how my former city was responding to the pandemic. And some of them had to do with some special individual assistance grants, some small business grants and loan programs, and we're sitting there and you're all on the fly. Everything was due a week ago, and every decision is critical to these people's livelihoods. There's emergency rental programs that I oversaw as well, rental assistance programs. And, when you're in there and you're rushing through to get these great programs out to the community, sometimes I said, hey, let's just step back for a minute. Are we reaching our nonprofits that are led by, or that are serving, very particularly serving our minority populations? Are we actively not just putting information out equally, but are we making an attempt to reach out to minority business owners to talk about our special, COVID-19 relief programs in terms of grants and loans for small businesses? Because you can say, in true, earnestness and true, the belief that you're doing something fairly, and you can say, oh yeah, I released a flyer and I even translated it, but that doesn't mean that it's fair. And I think that the work that I did through the MPA program just helped me put on a completely different lens in which to consider my programs, consider my communications. So you're really not only just getting to people equally, but getting to them equitably. And those are two very different things. And, I couldn't be more grateful for, just having that exposure, because it's really changed a lot about, how I've approached my job and the importance with which I come to work every day. I feel like the work that I'm doing is really, hopefully, having a positive impact. And so, that's why it's just such an honor to talk about this and encourage others to really do their work and see it through this type of lens. So I think hopefully that answers some questions on how, I've kind of implemented this in my career, but I'm always happy to answer questions about this or the program in general at the end.
Thank you, Dom. Appreciate it. It's nice to know that graduate school was so life-changing for you, and that all the ideas Bill and I spend our time thinking about and trying to teach actually can be applied. It's also nice to know that somebody can switch jobs in the middle of a pandemic. So congratulations on your new position. I know we have a lot of people who come back to grad school during an economic crisis like this one, or who are interested. And the truth of the matter is government is a major driver of employment. And so there are lots of opportunities currently, and they're expanding in many, many divisions of what's happening in the public sector. Elizabeth, you are not in the public sector. You are in a nonprofit and graduate school, so a glutton for punishment. Elizabeth has the distinction of having been on the sole Capstone team in 8 years now, that not only produced a Capstone report of distinction, but has also published in a peer-reviewed journal. She and her team were published in the Journal of Social Work the year following their completion of the program. And so kudos to you, Elizabeth. I know the work that you do is impactful. And so we'd like to hear about your thoughts on this topic and the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. And to reiterate or to confirm, Dominique was also part of that Capstone group too. So we have a long history.
Yeah, she was. I'm sorry.
Some numbers inside and out. And we're delighted to be able to carry forward the work we did even after we graduated, because it is so imperative that we disseminate the knowledge into the field. So we were thrilled to do it. I came to USC because I had spent 24 years with the YMCA. The last decade was in C-suite positions. I had a nice job. It was easy by that time for me to do what I needed to do. Solid pay and a clear path to eventually a very cushy retirement. But I started to realize that there were things that I had questions about, primarily around the big picture. How do nonprofits function in society? What are the expectations, and what makes their work effective or not? I saw evidence of harm in some of our practices and became concerned that I might be, through my leadership, exacerbating some of the inequities that we said we were trying to address. So I came to USC with really an open slate of expectations, wanting to know more, but not sure exactly what I wanted to know. What I found is that through the course of my academic career with USC, each class created a building block. And by the time I got to our capstone project, I felt really well prepared to work in the real world with a real client around a social problem that needed to be addressed. And finding a teammate in Dominique and our other two classmates was so unique because we all brought a firm commitment to the table of wanting to do our very best work. After I finished Capstone, I had one more semester, and that's when I took 628. And this class in particular solidified my worldview as someone who felt compelled with urgency to address the inequities I saw in society. And coming out of this particular class, I knew that I wanted to select my next job, my next professional step, with a lot of care, a lot of thought, and in an organization that had so much potential with the right leadership. After 5 months, I found Students Rising Above. Students Rising Above is about 20 years old. It was founded to help low-income, first-generation students into and through college. And it also had expanded to provide workforce development to the same constituency. It had wraparound care, a solid reputation, and some really strong stakeholders. When I started doing research about the opportunity, however, I noticed something very troubling. And that was that the organization was using, at its worst, patriarchal benevolence to entice stakeholders to be involved and to give. And its fundraising model was very much built on a protocol of poverty tourism, if you will, where white wealthy people would hear a little bit about how things are on the other side of the tracks, become horrified, feel mercy, and in the worst cases, pity, and contribute to the organization. And I saw evidence that these white wealthy donors had wielded not only control of how the organization was showing up and framing its students, but in many ways were driving which programs would be emphasized. After I interviewed and I saw that there was largely no recognizance of this particular issue, I knew I had to take the job because I knew that this was something that I could really impact. Since I've been on board, we have done logic modeling throughout the staff team. We've used a theory of change model to really look at how you use positive psychology, asset framing, and flip everything we were saying about our students on its head so that we now hold up the strengths, the resilience, the persistence, the commitment to school that our students have demonstrated as a strength that our entire community can benefit from if this population is given the opportunity to lead. And so by putting our students, by framing them in a position of power and strength, we then not only continue to reinforce that within our students and develop self-advocacy and a sense of agency, but we also frame and change the narrative that's told in our communities. And our staff now is at a point where they've seen it and they can't unsee it. So when something crosses our desks that was from potentially the old way of thinking about our students, it gets flagged, it gets changed. And what we're doing now is seeing that our donors are starting to feel a difference. What this has done, because everything we know in public policy has a trade-off, what this has done is shifted our donor base. Now, when we have wealthy white donors coming and saying, I've got this great idea and I've got the money to pay for it, let's do it. The question we ask is, who are we serving here? Are we serving the community that is telling us and showing us what they need? Or are we serving wealthy white people who feel like they have a good idea and would like to feel good about their situation? So we've had to essentially jettison some of our longtime donors, which has required quite a bit of strength, quite a bit of leadership and confidence building on behalf of our staff. And we've now pivoted, especially with the civil rights movement that we're in right now, to be able to demonstrate, particularly to our corporate partners, that as an organization that sits at the intersection of racial justice and social equity and drives to interrupt intergenerational poverty. We are a solid investment. We are an organization that gets the job done. And this is a way that corporations could put their money where their mouths are around D&E. And so we've recently received some very large gifts. We just got a $50,000 gift from a Silicon Valley corporation out of the blue. They said, we think you do great work. We want to be your partner. That is where the opportunity is going to be. I am thrilled because we use the credo, the medical profession's credo of do no harm in everything we do at SRA now. And we are working to a place where not only democratizing our staff, we're hiring our alumni back into our workforce. We're also populating our board of directors, and we're completely shifting how we think about this population. I would never have had that awareness if I hadn't come to USC, and I am thrilled to have had the experience I did, particularly in 628. Dr. Leach will tell you that I didn't really want to leave the class. In fact, I had a 15-page paper that I kept working up on right until it was time to post grades. But I still cite data from that research that I was able to do, and it completely changed how I position our population. So this has been really invaluable, and I have to say I was a little disappointed when I graduated because I didn't want it to end. So I launched right back into another program, and in 5 years, hopefully I'll be graduating again.
Elizabeth, sounds like you have another publication in the works there. You've got the logic model, the theory, the data, and a great story.
Actually, yes, we are working. We have two publishable research projects we're doing out of SRA. One of our board members has a PhD in epidemiology through JHU. And so we're going to be working on a study around developing critical consciousness through Frere's theory of student advocacy. And then we also are, I'm working on the project with our PhD students at Price School. So more to come.
Fantastic.
I didn't hear a capstone report in there yet, Elizabeth.
Oh, you want another capstone report?
I'm sure that you're ready for capstone students to come work with you.
Oh, yes. In fact, I have thought about that. And as soon as we are evolved a little bit more and I am ready for the organization, I've got you on speed dial.
That's great. We'll take questions in the chat box for any of our participants tonight on any topic. And if you wouldn't mind thinking about some questions, I'll ask Ben one. Ben, if you had to advise an incoming graduate student on issues of professional work in diversity and social justice or at USC in terms of grad school, what's the one piece of advice that you take away from your USC experience that's most helpful in this arena to you and the people you work with?
Take 628.
This is not a promotion for Dr.
No,
Leach.
it is absolutely not a promotion for Dr. Leach. But I mean, having a sort of planning background myself, I appreciate that particular course, and just talking to cohorts, I know that this class has a huge impact to a lot of folks, and it kind of opened up their eyes to what else is happening around them in this country, and something that they weren't even aware that was happening. So I thought that was a very interesting class to have for this program. I was kind of surprised that we have that, but now that I've taken it, I'm surprised that it hasn't made its way to a requirement yet. But that's what I would say in short.
So the exposure of graduate school to things that you wouldn't normally have touched on in your career and other perspectives, is that?
Yeah, I think obviously everybody comes with a different background, right? So either you come to the program and you get your experience validated through the courses, which 628 kind of did for me, or you come and you have your eye-opening moments. And in my conversation, a lot of my cohorts, 628 did that for them. So, and I thought, the program was actually quite fantastic, and so.
That's great, thanks. Dominique, same question for you. What piece sticks with you most that you use most often professionally?
You know, I think for me, I mean, I don't want to just repeat what Ben shared. So, I mean, I will absolutely agree with that. But I think for me, in terms of the professional development, is that I really appreciated the way that the program, to me, layers the sort of individual improvements, the areas of, you know, thinking about, we touched on this, you know, your unconscious biases, the way that you lead in an organization. And there's really that sort of self-development, always through a professional, you know, lens and framework, of course. But then when it's layered with these classes, such as 628 or many others, you know, I just, you know, we have to plug, you know, Dr. Leach's class, but truly because it was so influential on me personally. But there are many others that were much more sort of hands-on and gritty about and meaty about the work. What I found is that it caused me to always kind of go into my professional career thinking about, how do I bring my best self, and then how do I bring my best work? And I think that in the program, you're constantly balancing those things. You know, you're likely taking, you know, one class, one semester, or maybe two classes. And I found that I really liked the way that there's that focus on the personal development and the sort of that skill sets that you're bringing with you into your career. And, you know, I just think that type of thing, when you then go, you know, back to work with both of those sets of tools, I mean, I hope, and I'm assuming for everybody, but I mean, you can only be that much more effective. And that's really been, played a big role for me and really been impactful.
That's great. Elizabeth, since you've already talked to that subject, I have a different question for you. Can you talk about what you gained from the other students in the program? So knowing that you looked at these sorts of issues that Ben and Dominique talked about and had those same experiences, what is it, how is that shaped by the student colleagues that you participate with?
I was thrilled to find the level of professional maturity in my colleagues that I did. Their ability to bring their past experiences, their work histories to the table and help us in a discussion, for example, look through various frameworks or look through lenses based on their experience in the workforce was really, really helpful. And I think I valued so much the ability of others to say, well, what if you think about it this way? Because as a not-for-profit leader, I have a completely different perspective than someone who works in local government or public policy or any other litany of experiences that others were coming from. So I really valued the professional maturity, but also just the eclectic backgrounds that people were bringing to the table, and got into some really interesting, stimulating conversations with others. And now the Trojan Network has led me to a place where I'm actively working with other Price School students and graduates day to day because of what they brought to the table and engaged me with. So I would definitely say it was the value of all these experiences together.
Great. There's a question about our GRE waiver. So let me just answer that on my way to asking Dr. Leach a question. The faculty has determined that GRE or GMAT test waivers are available for admissions with two conditions. One is a 3.0 or better GPA from your undergraduate institution, and 5 years of managerial work experience, something that's in the field and related. So managerial work experience can be people, can be budgets, or can be content. So because public administration is a broad field, so is our interpretation of what kind of resources you're managing, but that's what we look for in our admissions process. And it means that we have a lot of students that, as Elizabeth describes them, who come to the table with broad professional experience. So my question for you, Bill, is how do you balance as a faculty member the students who come to your classroom and staying current in the field. So I know that you teach with the most current materials and with an idea of structure and theory, but what is it you do specifically that makes this work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, in the urban planning and social policy course, I think the currency comes to a great degree just kind of being a kind of a news junkie and following current events constantly. And so whenever I see some sort of an assertion in the news about cause and effect, to be like this policy does this or that program achieved that, I always kind of dive into the USC library and chase down the original work that establishes that relationship. So it's just a lot of like passion for the material and motivation to find out what is the actual evidence. And I guess so that's one place where it comes from. It also comes from the students, because students, as Elizabeth was saying, she took her 5-page paper assignment and turned it into a 15-page paper. Students frequently get very deep into the material and produce really good work. So I would say, 90% of like the new readings that get added to the syllabus every semester probably come from students who are doing excellent research and kind of digging up the latest material on a particular topic. So I guess that's what I would say on that. The other kind of part of my world is courses like collaborative governance and program evaluation. And those are places where I actually kind of maintain my own research program. And so I'm kind of keeping up with the literature as I kind of produce some of the literature for those courses.
Which is to say, your class is never the same thing twice, is it, Bill?
Yeah, it's always, it's updated every semester, and it gets a little better every time, I think.
That's great. Ben, I have a question for you. It always struck me that you had a lot going on in a long career in complicated fields. How did you balance grad school, a personal life, and the responsibilities you had in your professional positions?
Well, Dr. D, as you know, I almost quit like twice, and you talked me back into it. So credit to you and talking me through it and off the ledge. When I started, I've been out of school for a long time as well. So getting back into it was challenging. Had a new job, new manager, those kind of things. I think having a supportive base around me. I think my wife was supportive. So that was certainly helpful. Work-wise, I had a good team of people that made my job a lot easier as a manager. So I think otherwise, I'm not sure I could have been able to. And then also too, once you start, you realize how much time you really have on your hands, right? Before you didn't realize that. And then I'm pretty much a routine kind of person. So once you set that routine and for that goal, and then you hit that spot every day or every week, you kind of get used to that. Again, you realize how much time you really have and then how little sleep you really need to survive. So I find myself in an understanding work environment as well, right? While I was in the program, I was in 4.5 years. And so in that span, I had 3 different jobs and I was fortunate enough to be able to work from my office, for example, on a late night after work and be able to get on a call, talking to you, Dr. D, and to my cohorts. So I think it's just evaluating your surroundings, making sure you have a supportive group around you, and then 2, just set the tone for yourself, having that routine and then set goals to hit every time. So that's what I used.
Sounds great. In the chat box, we're all welcoming back Melissa. So we've missed you, Melissa, and we will hunt you down to come back. So we're glad you're feeling better and you're back with us. Are there other questions? I think I saw Summer and some of our other recent alumni in the class. Congratulations. Dominique, you were pregnant in the program and had your second baby?
Yes, I was thinking of lively things. So in the program, I had my son was 2 when I started, And I believed I walked at graduation when I was 9 months pregnant with number 2. And in the middle of Capstone, the most amazing award-winning Capstone team ever, I accepted a new position as well. This is the next new position. I've been very fortunate lately, but yeah. So and we bought a new home in the middle of it too. And the team, I think all of your classmates are so supportive though. I mean, I don't think there was one person that would have ever said, oh, that's a lot going on. You probably can't do it. They were like, well, that's a lot going on. What can we do to get through this together? It was the cohort, and it was also all of the professors. And yeah, I did it it was just over 2 years. So yeah, it was amazing. There's nothing you can't do. And when the work is inspiring, it's really awesome.
I did see the smile on your husband's face at graduation when you were finished, though. He was pleased.
I, like Elizabeth, do have plans to get my PhD. I have promised my family I am waiting 5 years in between. So there you go.
Very good. Very good. I know we're coming up on time here. Is there anybody else from the audience who wanted to ask? Jenny, good question. Thank you. Time management skills. Anybody want to comment on your favorite time management skill?
I will. Technology. Find the tools that work best for you. And when we were in Capstone, we picked up several new technological tools that saved us an inordinate amount of time. We did all of our qualitative data coding in a software called NVivo, which precluded us from having to do it by hand. And so we weren't afraid to learn new technologies in order to expedite some of our processes and have more accuracy. So I am a huge fan, whether you're an early or late adopter by nature, learn to lean in to some of the technologies that are available because they can be huge.
That's a great tip. And we often have students who say to Bill and I and our colleagues, can't you just pick the 1 or 2 technologies we need to know and leave it alone? And our answer is always no. If the life cycle of technology, and Ben will know this with Apple right there, if the life cycle of technology is 3 years, and you can imagine the program's now in our 9th year heading to 10, we're at least on our 3rd generation, if not 4th or 5th of new technology tools. So part of that digital literacy is my favorite topic to lecture on, and I think we try and find ways to make that great for students. Bill, do you want to wrap this up and take us out with your last slide?
Oh, sure, thanks. I know we have like 30 seconds or less, but yeah, Thomas Paine was one of the original rabble-rousers who inspired the American Revolution, and he actually proposed things that that look a lot like our current social security system and universal basic income, and so he was kind of a way ahead of his time. But here he has this quote where he's noticing that our union is not perfect, and of course it never will be. But the kind of the theme tonight is let's keep fighting on until our union is more perfect than it is now. So thanks to everybody for joining tonight.
Thank you to our panelists, and congratulations to the new graduates and those of you who are starting with us in the fall, and anyone interested in joining us soon. So thank you, Emily. Appreciate everybody. Fight on.